I am so excited to share this topic with you today. So often, when I talk to business owners and community managers, they feel like they are the only ones that are going through this and that there must be something wrong with them if this is happening inside of their community. And when I share this with them, they get this sense of, oh, I'm not alone. It's not just me. And this is normal. And it takes away the feeling of overwhelm and panic, and often a feeling of failure that many community creators feel. So, I want to share with you the community development life cycle. What is this? Well, it's something that wasn't developed by me. It was developed by somebody else, another community nerd who loves studying communities, who was looking at the life cycle of in person communities in neighborhoods and communal living situations. Which, if you know anything about me, I'm a wannabe communal living person. So I was super fascinated in researching this. But what I found is that this very much applies to online community as well, to the communities that you're growing as community creators inside of your courses, your group programs, and your memberships. So let's talk about this community development cycle. It's four phases. And in those four phases, you may find yourself in one of these phases at any point, and you can move through them multiple times. In fact, you will move through them multiple times. So let's start with the first phase. Phase one is called forming. This is when your community is just getting started. They're starting to get their bearings. It's like when you enter into a party for the first time and you're just sort of feeling the room out. Now, most of you are not going to just barge in like you're the life of the party. You're going to kind of get a feel for what's going on. You're maybe behaving a little bit more subdued, a little bit more cautious as you learn the ropes. You're acting pretty independently. You haven't really formed any alliances. I think about, the show Survivor. Everybody's pretty independent at first. They are gauging the room before they determine their alliances. And maybe your extroverts are engaging a little bit more. Maybe your introverts are a little bit more quiet, but most people are just kind of looking around to see what's happening and trying to get a feel for what's happening inside of the community. That's the forming stage. So if you have a new community, you may find that it's a little bit quieter in there, and that's totally normal. If you have a whole bunch of new people coming into your community, you may find that your community actually kicks back into this forming stage where people are trying to figure out who are these new people and what is happening. Forming is a pretty calm stage, but there's not a lot of momentum happening. There's not a lot of progress happening. The second stage is called storming. Yep, that's right, storming. It is totally normal to have storming inside of your community. I know you want to avoid it. I'm an Enneagram 8, and I actually like conflict. I think that conflict is the gateway to intimacy, so I kind of enjoy the storming phase of most communities. But I know that most of you business owners don't. Most community managers don't. And they feel like they failed or like they've done something wrong or things are out of control if they enter the storming phase. Now, I will just say this, they very well may be out of control. And if you don't have those four pillars in mind, that community cultivated framework that I talked about in the first four episodes, then you probably have a problem on your hands. But if you can get those foundations in place, then this storming phase can actually be really healthy. But if you don't have those foundations in place, go back to episodes 1 through 4, listen to that to understand what the four pillars of a thriving community are so that you have that strong foundation in place before you get into this storming phase. So, what happens in the storming phase is people are no longer trying to fill the room out, and now they're starting to try to work together. They're building trust, they're forming opinions, and sharing those opinions. And that can lead to conflict. But just know conflict is not bad. Again, like I said, I kind of like conflict. My husband is a type 9 on the Enneagram. They're called the peacemakers. And he is a little bit more conflict avoidant, but over time, we've both learned that conflict is the gateway to intimacy. Really, it's inevitable in any relationship that you're going to have some type of conflict, some type of storming. So I want you to expect it. If there's anything that you learn from this, I want you to expect storming in your community, which means you need to prepare. Go back to that four pillars of a thriving community and the community cultivated framework. But storming will come out in different ways in different communities. It doesn't always look like a big blow up. It doesn't always look like a fight. Sometimes it's happening in the DMs to your community manager, or emails to your support team, or Instagram DMs to you, or maybe to other people in the community. Sometimes it's complaints that you're seeing in posts inside of your group. But here's what I want you to know. Anytime that you have any real version of storming, any real conflict that's bumping up against that culture that you set in your four pillars, you want to think of it as a realignment moment. It's an opportunity for you to realign the entire community around those beliefs, around those behaviors and boundaries that you want to have in your community. It gives you an opportunity to show people who you are, what you value, and let them know that they can get on the bus or they can get off and get out of the way. If you don't stand for something, then you really stand for nothing. And we've talked about this when it comes to building culture, but people need to have a leader. And when your community is storming, more than anything, is where leaders should rise up. When you look at cultures and countries like our nation, who's just walked through the pandemic, for example, there were people who rose up as leaders in the midst of that storm. They thrive in chaos. Now, I'm not saying your community is going to be chaos, but in the middle of a storm, people will inevitably be looking for a leader. And you want that leader to be you, not somebody else in your community that's going to start to shape your culture without your say. Okay, so make sure that you establish leadership. The realignment moment can also help you strengthen your values. But the most important thing is that you don't ignore it. Storming does not go away if it's not addressed, it just gets bigger. If the tornado is left to its own accord, it will continue to grow until something gets in the way of it growing. So you want to make sure that you are ready to step into the conflict, even though it will probably be imperfect, so that you can step in as a leader and help to realign your community. So I used to teach in-person workshops where I trained community creators and their teams. In one of those workshops, I met somebody who had a free Facebook community of about 30,000 people. Now, there was one person in that community that seemed to be a bit of a bad seed. Now, they started out as a really great member of the community, but they could tell that over time they had kind of developed this sense of ego and entitlement, and that they were starting to kind of steer the community in their own direction, away from the influencer, the visionary that owned and started that free community. Now, their community director had brought this up a few times, and it had essentially been ignored because the business owner really didn't want to step into the mess. They thought that addressing this individual would actually cause more problems than good. Well, if you can imagine, over time, this person's resolve for their feelings and opinions and ownership over the community only grew. And they ended up getting to a place where they felt like they couldn't remove this individual from the community because the community saw this person as the leader of the group instead of them. So you don't want that to happen to you. You want to make sure that if you see storming, which again doesn't always come out as conflict, but can really just feel like things are bumping up against your culture or the cause that your community is focused on, then you want to make sure to address it early and often. Now, if you do this, it allows for connection to happen, realignment to happen, and it is a sign of good leadership. So, what are some other ways that storming can show up? It can show up in bad advice that's being given. It can show up in opposing views when people don't agree with how you're doing things, or maybe just between two people in the community. Just have an eye out for it and be ready to address it. That's the storming phase. And again, it is expected, it is a natural part of a growing community. So, don't be surprised when it happens. Next, we're going to move on to the third phase, and that's the norming phase. This is when people really start to get how things work around here. And if you've been a strong leader, you've made it really clear how things are going to work, and you've realigned them under the norms of the community. They understand what the normal is, that this is the culture, and they begin to feel safe because, like I talked about in the first few episodes, safety is a really important aspect to connection. And in order to create safety, we need to have trust and clarity. And clarity comes from having structure and leadership. So that's what has established in that phase of storming. Now we've defined some structure. Now we have some clear leadership so we can feel safe because we know this culture. What happens here is you start to get more intimacy, more cooperation among members. You start to get more engagement and collaboration as they work together towards that common goal or that common cause that you have set. So, where you might see this is when people develop a better together mentality, that I actually want to serve and show up more for others in the community than I'm asking for, that I'm commenting more than posting, that I'm showing up more than I'm asking questions, that I am constantly validating other people in the community, and we're working together to make the community as a whole better. So that's your norming phase. And then finally, we get into the performing phase. This is the exciting part because now that people know what the boundaries are, they've got this normal, we've kind of been through some conflict, we have a clear leader. The performing phase is where we get to elevate ourselves into our highest level of function. We are making progress together towards that goal. We're motivated, we're knowledgeable, we're achieving really high levels of success. I think about this like group projects, right? You experience this in group projects where you're kind of figuring everybody out in the forming stage. And then you get to like the conflict stage or the storming stage where people are maybe not agreeing on what the big picture of the project is going to be or who's going to do what. But then once we get those norms figured out and we all identify what the structure is, we start to really move together and perform towards a common goal. Now, it would be really nice if it stopped here. If we just got through the storming phase, figured out the norming phase, and then, we're off to the races with the performing phase. But it doesn't work that way. If you remember when we started, I called this the community development cycle, not path, which means that we don't just reach an end of the path and hit the performing phase and stay there forever. It's going to keep going around and round. There's things that can kick you back into the storming phase, like, hey, a bad apple just shows up and creates conflict in your community. Maybe you add a whole bunch of new people into your community at once, and it sends you right back to the forming phase and then into the storming phase. This happens when you have a launch model and you may add hundreds or thousands of members at a time. It can also happen whenever there's changes happening inside of your community. And I'm going to do another episode for you on how to mitigate that as much as possible with a really great change management process, but it can still send you back into the storming phase whenever you have change happening inside of your community. Maybe you have a team member leave, like you have a community manager who's really ingrained into your community and they end up leaving. That could potentially cause you to go back to that forming and storming phase. So you just want to make sure that you are aware and that you're prepared. And you're thinking about the fact that this goes around and around, and that you're thinking about what phase you are currently in, because that may shift how you're focusing the energy of your community. You may need to slow down from trying to push people to progress, to pause and have a realignment moment to make sure that you restore leadership and safety in your community so that you can get back to that performing phase. So, I want you to take a moment and think about what phase is your community in? Are you in the forming phase where people are still quietly trying to feel it out and figure out what this community is all about? Are you in the storming phase where people are starting to be opinionated and maybe there's some conflict happening, whether it's rising up to the surface or happening really underground? Are you in the norming phase where now we're really figuring out the structure, the leadership, the boundaries? We're starting to get really clear on that. Or are you in the performing phase where you have a really strong cause, a really strong culture and structure, and everybody is moving forward towards that common goal? So I hope as you're working towards cultivating your communities and you have this in mind, that it helps you realize that you are normal. Yes, your community is normal. And in fact, you may have communities that are in different phases at different times. It's totally normal. And now that you know the community development life cycle, you have an awareness of it. So you can get out of panic mode and you can be prepared for it and know that there is a next phase on the other side that you can move through, especially when you're in the storming phase. So if you enjoyed this episode, will you do me a quick favor and leave a review letting me know what you liked about it and what you want to hear more of? And if you have a second, share this with another community creator friend because they probably need to hear this about this storming phase as well, that this is normal too. Because so often we are susceptible to feeling like we failed when things start to get stirred up in our community, and it's just a normal part of the process. All right, I'll see you in the next episode.